Right, Assalamualaikum and good evening to everyone. I hope you had a good, heavy, light tea. We call that evening tea. It was pretty heavy, isn't it? I think that should be better than our lunch. Our lunch just now, we had a very heavy lunch and then too heavy. That's what Dr. Faruq said. Okay, so tonight's forum session is quite an interesting one, to say the very least, and I hope I can do a good job in moderating this one. It's concerning the rights of religious minorities by taking a comparative perspective in different societies. The Marrakesh Declaration itself focuses on the rights of religious minorities in predominantly Muslim majority communities. And one of the things that was asserted in the declaration was the call to establish a broad movement for the just treatment of religious minorities in predominantly Muslim majority communities, and to raise awareness for their rights. And we shall also work together to ensure the success of these efforts. And we have, how should I describe this? A star-studded lineup for tonight. Let me briefly introduce them. We have Dr. Ihsan Ali Fauzi, Founder Director of the Center for the Study of Religion and Democracy under the Paramadina Foundation. We have Dr. Faisal Musa, Research Fellow at UKM. We have Dr. Tim Rackett, Associate Professor at Help University. And you have Dr. Sivin Kit, Ordained Minister with the Lutheran Church of Malaysia. So, okay. So, we'll start with Dr. Faisal first, since this will be his first time speaking to the crowd tonight regarding assessment, a comparative assessment on the right of religious minorities. And then after that, we'll proceed with Dr. Ihsan, and then maybe Dr. Tim and Dr. Sivin. I'll pass the mic to Dr. Faisal.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's a great pleasure to be here with the star-studded panelists. Before we continue and resume our discussion, I would like to highlight, but most possible that the whole day you've been discussing the same thing. What is religion here? Yeah, it is important for us to understand that it covers faith, yeah, conscience, theistic and atheistic. This is a definition, a standard definition accepted in United Nations declaration. And it is important also for us to understand that there are 28 human rights instruments, and all of it has at least one para, one article mentioning religion. However, there is no particular specific covenant for freedom of religion and belief. In 1976, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 27, has been accepted by the United Nations, and it clearly stated that in those states in which ethnic, religious, or linguistic minorities exist, persons belonging to such minorities shall not be denied the right, in community with the other members of their group, to enjoy their own culture, to profess and practice their own religion, or to use their own language. This covenant, ICCPR, had also been read together with Declaration on the Rights of Persons Belonging to National or Ethnic, Religious and Linguistic Minorities, 1992. However, at the local level in Malaysia, this International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, 1976, and have been rejected. I think in 2013, it's obvious that the Muslim lawyer under this name, Muslim UPRO, a group, I think, sent by Malaysian government in order to debunk coalition of Malaysian NGO Comengo to Geneva, and they've stated that they reject ICCPR entirely. However, it's also important for us to note that during the UPR session, at least few countries, few Muslim countries, including Palestine and Sierra Leone, both are OIC members, suggested and strongly proposed Malaysia to sign ICCPR. And if we look into this declaration, at least 167 countries have signed this. This is including, among others, Jordan, Egypt, Bahrain, Iraq, Iran, Morocco, Lebanon, Sudan, Syria, Turkey, Algeria, Pakistan, and Indonesia. In Yemen and Afghanistan, so. Two countries that have not signed ICCPR, among Muslim countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and unfortunately our country, Malaysia. So, what I'm trying to say here is, it is difficult at the international level to have a specific covenant on freedom of religion. And in fact, in 1981, there's an attempt by members to push a covenant, and they have this declaration on the elimination of all forms of intolerance and discrimination based on religion or belief, 1981. And from here, we have this post special rapporteur freedom of religion and belief, and I think 6 or 7 special rapporteur have been elected. The current one is from Maldives, if I'm not mistaken, and I think the one have done a lot of work in documenting was Professor Heine Bielefeld, the previous one. So why is it difficult to have a covenant, a specific covenant to protect religion? Yeah. First of all, is because members of the states disputing each other in how to deal with people who change religion, who convert other religions. Muslims converting to Christianity, or Christians converting to Islam, and so on, so on. And also, they are also discussing, and heavy discussion, I mean, there's no tolerance there, on rights of children to convert or to change their faith. So children here are defined under 21, for sure. And human rights are secular product. This is also one allegation by the states or those entities that doesn't want to have one particular covenant. So when human rights are so-called a secular product, so it's not legitimate to protect religion. So how come a secular product protect religion? Also, religious individuals reject non-religious people here, as that religious people denied. They don't want to recognize the non-religious people to have same rights, just like them. And the last one is there's no consensus between the states on how to settle issues such as coercion on religion. So these are the thorny issues that make it difficult to have a proper covenant, in particular to protect freedom of religion and belief. So when we have this kind of dispute or conflict in between the states or people who actually deal with freedom of religion, it is not strange when we have also difficulties in countries like Malaysia to have a proper understanding, or in fact to have one proper law in order to respect other religions and minorities, especially I'm trying to say here the intra-minorities, deals with the Shias and the Ahmadis. And this makes it more thorny, more difficult when people try to differentiate or distinguish who are the minorities and who are the cult. The Ahmadis or the Qadianis are considered as cult group, considering that they have one leader who becomes sources of their teachings. So this is among things that I want to highlight in a matter of freedom of religion and issues regarding minorities. This is one example why freedom of religion and belief have been considered as one difficult issue. In fact, Professor Heine Bielefield successfully highlighted, I think, in 2013 on why there are, I mean, his theme in 2013 was collective religious hatred. And this is, among others, what we have in a society like Malaysia. Yeah. For example, he mentioned that, among others, why collective religious hatred happened in society because of corruption's endemic. This is one reason why, according to him, there are collective religious hatred. He mentioned, this is his words, in a country in which people experience corruption as affecting all sectors of societal life, they can hardly develop a reasonable trust in the fair functioning of public institutions. So when this happened, the society tried to cling with the religious or authorities, yeah, and because of this, there are no particular smooth or healthy discussion or dialogues between communities and groups. Professor Heine Bielefield also emphasized that authoritative political climate is, among others, become a source of collective religious hatred. So rumors and gossips which remain unchecked by any counter evidence and counter arguments can easily escalate into fully fledged conspiracy theories against unwelcome religious competitors. And in this society, usually the minorities are being blamed easily or being targeted by the authorities. Last one, Professor Heine Bielefield also mentioned that usually in the society that have rigid political identity, in this sense, Malaysia has this kind of criteria because we try to connect or we link Islam with Malay. Yeah? We read it together in our constitution. And not just that, Islam is also been highlighted in our constitution as an identity or national identity, yeah? Because it's been stated as official religion in our constitution. And because of this, minorities that outside of these definitions of this framework become a targeted group or entity. And these are the reasons, according to him, conflicts or crises happen in society. And strangely, Professor Heine Bilfield, I think in his two terms, when he sit position as Special Rapporteur of Freedom of Religion, he went to few Muslim countries, and one country that he actually fond of is Sierra Leone, member of OIC. And he mentioned in his report that not only that Sierra Leone managed to other religion, other Islam, but also Sierra Leone, interestingly, managed to recognize other minorities within Islam, including the Shias and the Ahmadis. And this, according to Professor Heine Bilfield, should be an example for countries that have sectarian issues. Yeah. These are the things that I think I want to highlight for the first round before coming back to our own society, Malaysia. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Dr. Faisal. So a few points that I managed to summarize is, number one, it is striking that Malaysia tries to portray itself as a country that tries to promote peace and harmony, coexistence, but it's one of the few Muslim majority countries that haven't affirmed its commitment to protect rights of religious minorities under the ICCPR. And secondly, an interesting observation is that even Palestine recommended us to sign the declaration. The country that we tried to put so much effort in helping them is asking us to help ourselves to sign the agreement. And I think I'll stop my summary for now, because I feel there are a lot more things to say. I think I will continue with Dr. Ihsan.
Again, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This time, selamat sore, selamat malam. Selamat malam, I think, right? Selamat malam, selamat sore. As a start, I think I just wanted to state some facts about the state of religious freedom or unfreedom, religious unfreedom, or restrictions in Indonesia. When I see that important, I will discuss some issues and state my take on that issues. Some point you recognize this from my morning sessions. One is Indonesia is among the largest archipelago in the world. It is also most populous and multi-ethnic, multi-religious countries in the world. And since 1998, we are the fourth largest democracy in the world and the largest Muslim democracy. There is, again, good news and bad news involved here. One, democracy provides avenues not only for freedom of expressions, including religious freedom, but also freedom to protest that sometimes are manipulated by politicians to incite Muslim hatred and their act of intolerance and discriminations against the others, and these others, especially small sectarian Muslim groups such as the Ahmadis and the Shia. I've talked about that this morning. Secondly, our country's motto, which is Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, we survive because of that motto. I don't know, because I think maybe we are lucky. Yes, we are just lucky. Because of that, despite some critical moments in our history, the last one, I think the most challenging moment was what we call kristal in Bahasa Indonesia. Kristal, crisis total crisis, 1998, when monetary crisis was followed by act of discriminations against some Indonesians of ethnic Chinese origin, what we call kerusuhan anti-China. It was not the first time, but I think it was 1965 was not particularly about Chinese. This is big enough. And because of this reason, some observers have said this morning start to talk about will Indonesia break up, and lucky us, we survived. This was also followed by the communal interreligious violence between Muslim and Christians, such as those which took place in Ambon, North Maluku, Poso in Central Sulawesi, which took the life of more than 3,000 people. Now let's go deeper into issues on the relation between Muslim and other minority groups in the country. Religiously speaking, Indonesia's population is divided into Muslims, 80, well, depend on the statistics that you got, but generally it's 85 to 88%. Protestant are 5%, Roman Catholics 3%, Hindus are 2%, Buddhist 1%, and others 1%. But religio-politically and ideologically, we are not an Islamic state like the one we find in Saudi Arabia, not even in Malaysia. Islam is the only formal state religion here, right? We have even more state religion. I will tell you later. This is the state based on national ideology called Pancasila. 5 sila. One is the belief in one supreme God. Some people translate or understand it as monotheism, but others are not. Second one is just in civilized humanism. Third is the unity of Indonesia. Fourth, democracy, and the fifth is social justice. There are at least two, but I can add more later. Interesting point to be made out of this fact. While it is stated that we believe in one supreme God, ketuhanan yang Maha Esa in bahasa Indonesia, there was no, as far as I know, there was no discussions of what do we mean by this oneness of God. Indonesia's Buddhist or Hindu leaders, as far as I know, never asked if this refers to the concept of Islamic monotheism, Tawheed, for example. There was no discussion about that. Neither was the discussions of whether atheism is really, haram, forbidden in Indonesia, in the country. My friend, one of my respondent in one research, An Alexander, who was brought to the court because he posted his personal reflections on atheism on his Facebook page, was finally imprisoned, not for that posting per se, but for the blasphemous statement he was accused to make through that posting. From reading our history, so An was not, imprisoned because of that statement on atheism, but because he found guilty for blasphemous statement about something that could incite other people, hatred. From reading our history and statements made by our founding fathers, my sense is there is strong agreement among them, a kind of a gentleman agreement. Sorry again, you women. Yeah, last night, Pak Chandra Muzaffar also was speaking about this gentleman agreement because there was no woman involved in our constitution making. Around this, they all wanted to suggest that our country is a righteous one. Our nationalism is, to borrow Jeremy Menchik's term, which is a very good one, is godly nationalism. So it's not only just nationalism, but it's a kind that is godly nationalism. And indeed, our preamble, our opening of the opening of our constitutions, there is a sentence read, dengan rahmat Tuhan yang Maha Esa. So it's so religious. The national, the country is that religious, and also our nationalism is godly, and there is, I think, enough room for the country to accept, not only to accommodate, people of religious believers to make their contributions. I think there's a kind of civil religion in the U.S. That kind of stuff. The second point, also although numerically Muslims are dominant religious community in the country, most Christians and Catholic religious communities are concentrated in certain areas, in eastern part of Indonesia, especially Maluku, Papua, and Timor. By being so, while they are minorities in terms of total number around the country, they are majority religious communities in those particular areas. And by being so, they have strong and one, sometimes unified voice on certain issues, like the basis of our country, that our central government has to listen and follow, because they are concentrated in one certain area. But I should also say that they have not only voice but also island. So, to lose the island of Maluku, for example, because they want to want to separate from Indonesia is something important to consider. That's actually the secret behind the replacement of the Jakarta Charter with the first sila of the Pancasila that I discussed this morning. And no wonder a constitutional attempt to reenact the Jakarta Charter in 2002, known as Seven Magic Word, dengan dengan kewajiban menjalankan syariat Islam bagi para pemeluknya, which suggests that this a state based on Islamic Sharia, with the obligation for Muslims to act accordingly. There was a statement, that statement in the Jakarta Charter before it was replaced by the first sila of the Ketuhanan Yang Maha Esa. So the Ketuhanan Yang Maha Esa now is put as the first sila, replacing the Jakarta Charter. Next point. Indonesia recognized 5 official religions: Islam, Protestantism, Roman Catholicism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. And later, after the decision made by our late President Abdurrahman Wahid, I think 2000, if not 1999, the state started to recognize another religion, which is Confucianism. This is a good move. The Indonesians of Chinese origin were so happy. It was a strong recognition for their traditional religion, and no wonder if Gus Dur's tomb is one of the favorite site for Indonesia's tourism. Because so many Chinese are coming to that tomb almost every time, because they think that Gus Dur has made very great contribution to their traditions. We non-Chinese are also happy because of that there is more religious holidays now. So this month there's so many holidays. Last week the Nabi Muhammad naik ke atas, and then this week Yesus naik ke atas, and so many so many religious holidays in Indonesia. But there are 2 other problems with this conception of state-recognized religion, and I think this is a crucial one. One, what about other and unrecognized religions? Well, actually, our Minister of Religious Affairs, Pak Lukman Hakim Saifuddin, is busy now preparing a bill to answer precisely this problem. His rhetoric is, my duty, my job as a minister is to serve the Indonesian believers. And in order for me to, do my job correctly, appropriately, I need to know who they are, the believers. And in order to be able to understand who are the believers, I need to have a definitions on what religion is. So give me definition of religion and give me a bill. He called the bill undang-undang untuk kerukunan. Kerukunan means more on harmony, while we are LSM, the NGO activists, prefer freedom. It's not about harmony, it's about freedom of religion. It's not the harmony between religious group, but about freedom. Second problem, what about traditional religion, indigenous religion? They are usually, because of the Eurocentric, I think, the definition of about religion came from Christianity first, and later on, because of colonialism, post-colonial state also absorb that definition of religion and start using Islam as the standard to define religion. And because of that very definition of religion, there was exclusionary act actually against any other religion, including and especially indigenous religion. So religions, well, they don't even now, they don't even want to be called religion, because we are not religion. We are actually just traditions, agama leluhur, the traditions of the elderly. So that's the two questions that is going on in Indonesia now. The last one, while and this is only just for the start, while our constitution respects religious freedom, it also recognizes its limit. So, for example, this morning I discussed this issue also by saying that you can exercise your freedom of religion until you disturb other people's harmony and peace. The problem is who defines peace and harmony, which could be very subjective. More serious than that, imagine if someone, politicians, in collaboration with tolerant groups, for example, make use of that very clause to manufacture religious hatred against minorities through the mechanism I called this morning hate spin, for example. So that's the issue surrounding our religious freedom in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ihsan. 2 points regarding his presentation. Number one is that compared to Malaysia, where we take a one-off approach of adopting a stance of what should be the religion of the Federation, Indonesia takes a more, shall I say, contemporaneous approach. It sees from time to time the need to recognize, and it uses the list as a tool to unite the people together of different backgrounds. And I think that is unique approach compared to most other countries in the world. Secondly, the fact that they actually took the initiative to redefine what is religion as a means to, as an inclusive means to bring Indonesians together. I think that's something that needs to be applauded, and I think we should look at ourselves on a creative way to bring people together in this troubling times. Now I will continue with Dr. Tim Rackett.
Good evening, everybody. Could I just say a few words about like Buddhism? And I think Buddhism, or this in Thailand, it's important to see its contestation by minority practices, because there's a whole history of different interpretations of Buddhism which challenge the state recognized way. And I think this means really that religion, or in this instance a non-religion of Buddhism, it's got to denationalize itself. It's used part of the nation building in Thailand as the national religion, but that involves kind of religious nationalism. Not only religious nationalism, it's ethno-religious nationalism, as I tried to say in my earlier talk about Thai. To be Thai, you must be Buddhist. And see, like, comparatively in Myanmar, the Buddhist nationalism of Wiratu 969 movement is used against the Rohingya, who are not dissimilar from the Kek, from the Malay Muslims in southern Thailand. Dark others, they're not Buddhists, they don't belong. And it's sadly to know Aung San Suu Kyi has done nothing to really help them. What a surprise. I mean, she's a Burman, she's a member of the ruling class, and she hasn't done anything to help the Christian minorities of the Kachin in northern Burma either, who are an oppressed minority. So it's in Myanmar, it's not just the Rohingya Muslims, but it's Christian minorities like the Kachin, the northeast Myanmar, are being persecuted. They're being persecuted by a Buddhist army, nominally a Buddhist army. Okay, but coming back to Thailand, there's been a history of, there's different ways to be a Buddhist. I think the marginalized one, minority one that I like is called socially engaged Buddhism. If you've ever heard, that comes from a Vietnamese monk, Trick Nic Han, and in Thailand's associated with Buddhadasa and Sivaraksa Sulak is like, yeah. This kind of like anti-consumerist, anti-capitalist form of Buddhism, yeah? So it's a bit into Buddhist economics, looking after nature. But it's a marginalized branch of kind of Buddhism. Other practice of Buddhism was one by Prof, who's this ex-TV presenter who became a monk. And they live the Santi Asok. They live a very austere practice. They're all vegetarians. They don't wear shoes in their community. And it's like they challenge the way of being a Buddhist in Thailand, which is you just go to the rituals, go to the temple, maybe you make merit by giving money, but you don't really live it. You don't really practice it in a profound way. But this Santi Asok movement, led by this monk, in a way showed up people that you're not really practicing it how it can be practiced. Yeah, you want an easy way, but if you want to be a Buddhist, you give up sleeping on a bed. You practice 8 precepts, and he became very popular. So the state didn't like that. He was a challenge to the state authority in Thailand, and they said, "Oh, he was a heretic because he said he was arahant, he was enlightened." So he kind of came into conflict with the state. Another movement you might have seen on TV is called the Tamagaya movement. Have built this strange temple which is near Don Mueang Airport. When you fly in, you look at it, it's like a giant flying saucer. It's like a cult. The monks who run it, the abbots, own a lot of money. I mean, they have a lot of wealth, and if they're a Buddhist monk, you shouldn't have money. And they've got a very weird doctrine about some kind of astral crystals or something if you meditate, you can, in your solar plexus or something weird notion of Buddhism, and it's to do with the self. And if you know anything about Buddhism, the self is an illusion. So they've got doctrinally, they're kind of a bit weird, but they're very successful amongst the Thai urban middle classes of Bangkok. Really like this movement. They're meant to be associated, I'm not quite sure how, but with the red shirts, Thaksin, or even have royal patronage. And this movement started big that the police was sent in recently to arrest the leaders of this movement. Maybe it's a bit like Falun Gong in China. Any movement that gets a bit too big and popular and challenges the state, that has a monopoly on how to practice your religion, how to practice your faith, you must do it this way or else, seems to be stamped down on. So, but in Thailand, I think, on the other hand, it's maybe quite healthy, shows how to be a Buddhist is contested. Yeah, another tradition they have is a wandering monk tradition. Yeah, which just the monks eat 1 meal a day. They wander around, meditate in graveyards, meditate on rotting corpses. They used to meditate where there was wild tigers. Yeah, kind of overcome fear. But there's many traditions that exist, and I think it's kind of a richness, not just one way, my way or the highway. So the minority traditions exist within Buddhism, I think, and they're contested, they're raising questions. How are we a Buddhist? And again, let's not forget, the Buddhists in southern Thailand are a minority. This is what worries me, is I'm sympathetic towards BRNC. They need cultural autonomy, but what happens to the Buddhists that are there? And they're, for many generations, what happens to them if you institute Sharia law? Yeah, if it comes like an Islamic sultanate, the Buddhists there where do they go? Yeah? I mean, there's got to be some peaceful coexistence. This is why I was saying, focus on sameness, not on difference. Don't make the minor differences, the minor difference should be exactly that, minor differences, not major differences. What have you got in common? Yeah, this is kind of like embracing the otherness. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. 2 quick points in this one. First is the dangers of escalating nationalism to the extent of having an ethno-religious nationalism, which is what I've seen in Thailand and Myanmar, and I feel that if left unchecked, nationalism can itself be a very dangerous tool to be controlled in the hands of the few, and that can really divide the nation. Second is the fact that the state takes a concerted effort to define a certain way of practicing a religion itself demonstrates how there is actually the importance of protecting religious minorities, because if that right remains to be written or implemented properly, there's always the risk of having religion to be concentrated in the hands of the few. Now we'll continue with the session to Dr. Sivin.
Okay, as you know, I'm a storyteller, so when I was listening to Dr. Tim share earlier, it reminded me of this cleaner at the university in Agder, which is Kristiansand, Norway. And before I left, I got to know her and found out that she was from possibly near South Thailand side. And she was working as a cleaner, and she was very happy because she could speak Malay. And I kind of assumed that she's Malaysian. Then I realized she was not. She's Malay, but from Thailand. Then after I talked to her for a while, I realized that her favorite podcast in those days was Nick Aziz. So this is Norway, Malay Muslim cleaner, Thai citizen in Norway cleaning and telling me about Nick Aziz, how she is so fascinated with him and admire him, so on and so forth. And I think that is interesting for me because it also highlights not just the globalization part of this discussion, but also I would like to just touch on media. And just to add on, when I was talking to my son's schoolmate's mother, Norwegian citizen, Muslim, and her son is learning about how to read the Quran through Skype by a teacher in Pakistan. And I think media is something that I would like to put back on the table here, and especially in the Malaysian context. Some of the sociologists of religion now talk about the mediatization of religion. So it's not just about secularization thesis. The whole idea of mediatization, meaning, is a process in which, is more Nordic here, people get their first source of information no longer from traditional sources, but actually, in our case, maybe the internet, television, radio, etc. Often the first thing that people go for is Google, and depends which is on the first page or second page as their immediate source of information. And as I highlighted a little bit here and there in my own presentation, I think in Malaysia, even now, right now, I'm Facebook Live, I heard. Right? Hi, everyone. So you see, I mean, we are mediatized. Some of you right now are touching your phone. So this whole thing is implicit. And I think it's good to revisit this because it can be used both for good, for evil. Many of my students, when they first come to the seminary, their idea of Islam or other religions, at best, is if they have friends at school who are different religions, the point of entry is different. But for the others the first click is the YouTube video they have. So this is something I think is interesting, and I would just want to bring it up, especially in the Malaysian context. We are so mediatized, especially now we are probably one of the top Facebook users, at least in the world. WhatsApp, I think we're top, we're Uber, or, you know, I mean, everything is an app. Even the Jakim, and you know, my Jakim app is here to help me. So it's, in a sense, there's this mediatization. I wonder, and this is what sociologists are wondering, in what ways does it transform religion, change the way we think about religion, consume religion, and I'm using it again more as a category. In what ways religion is also changing media, the other way, shaping its logic. Because in many ways, religious communities is all about communicating our ideas across to the other person, whether in the form of persuasion or teaching, and so on and so forth. So I think it's interesting to highlight that. And in various controversies that at least the minorities in Malaysia, whether it's those days, the cowhead controversy for the Hindus, again, of course, the media was, in a sense, merely reporting, but it takes on a life of its own. As you see the images of the head of the cow that is cut off and dragged, and a lot of the emotions that it may generate, and we haven't gone into cognitive science, what these images does to your brain and all this kind of stuff. But I think it is an interesting point, and I know that when I went for some of these counter-violent extremism workshops, you know, there's this talk about counter-narratives, right? And there's a danger that we make into, oh, this is just about some kumbaya, nice story, you know, some of like the Thai commercials that you watch it during Mother's Day and you just cry and cry. You know I'm talking about, some of you, if you're forwarding these Thai emotional commercials. I mean, there's a danger that we go into that. But on the other hand, we also don't want to glorify violence, right? So how does the media navigate this? And I remember interviewing editors with online portals. Now, what is the media logic that's running out in the editors? I think these are some of the things we wrestle with, because media is such a big part of our lives, and of course in Malaysia, our phones. And a lot of viral messages that has gone forth often is through WhatsApp. I mean, the fastest way to spread lies or fake news or whatever you want to call it. So I think related to that was this idea that my PhD supervisor, David Herbert, was trying to bring out, not just about mediatization, is the whole, a bit more abstract, the notion of publicization, if I may use that term, of religion. The notion of public. And here is a European context, right? There's this idea that, okay, is religion making a comeback? Or is it really the return of the visibility of religion? Now, how many of us were quite surprised, like in a country like France, when they would talk about gay marriage, for example, you would assume that it was quite a straightforward discussion. But the protest that was organized against gay marriage was actually quite large. So there is perhaps something that is underneath that we have missed because of the way religion is portrayed, often by university elites and academics or the media, or etc. So I thought that was very interesting. The other thing that forced me to think about this was, after thinking about it, in Malaysia, Islam is definitely very public. You cannot ignore that. But suddenly, because of the Allah controversy, or whether it's the Hindraf issues, whether it's conversion cases about Buddhists, someone who went to a Buddhist, supposed to be a Muslim, but then she said that she's not really a Muslim, she was just in a Muslim family, something like that, about conversion. So these religions that were non-Muslims become visible, much more visible than before. And when it becomes more visible, it is much more public, then it's no longer private. It's just about private religion. And now remember what I want to talk about. When I was in Norway, again, before I came back, I was looking around, and usually I would take note because it's quite obvious that I'm the Asian guy walking on the street. Everyone is white. Or it's a Muslim. And we get along very well because both of us are minorities there, right? So this is the beginnings of ISIS being very popular, And suddenly we saw there was an invitation of people to go to a demonstration, an anti-ISIS demonstration. So I agreed to go as a researcher / participant observer on behalf of my supervisor. That was before I came back. And lo and behold, there were these invisible Muslims showed up. You saw them in pockets, but suddenly they were all together and they were out of their clay cave, so to speak. So in a sense, religion is public. Again, their religion is more public because in Norway, the dominant public religion is Lutheranism. It's the Church of Norway. And in Malaysia, it's interesting, I think in the last couple of years, as non-Muslim minorities, we are more public now. And I think that creates a certain challenge for us to imagine a Malaysian identity. So that's my second point. First on media, second is the notion of public. Because I think for some people, it's better for us to keep it all private, right? Just do your own thing. But now Hanayo, she writes a kind of a personal journey, but it's a public issue because of who she is. Third is, I think the last, in recent years, and tell me about time, by the way, is the role of religion in the public sphere is something that I'm more familiar with the Christians, that we have been thinking a lot about. Right at the level of the top, the Christian Federation of Malaysia, the kind of statements that is being generated in the last couple of years. Two, right at the bottom, sometimes I'm also worried whether some of our pastors are much more politicized than before. Before I left for Norway, I was trying to convince them not to be political, but at least take seriously politics, public issues. Now suddenly, they talk more about politics than I do, and I need to kind of tilt them back a little bit. But it's interesting, the prayer items of the church is different, all right? So if in the past we just pray for the rulers, pray for the government, may God bless them, now you have more specifics. We pray about 1MDB, we pray about, RUU 355. These are specific. Now, the moment you start going there, of course, you don't talk too much detail. You're talking to God, so he's supposed to know the details, right? But the concerns are expressed in these prayer items. Pray for birthday, pray for, this. So it's not just pray for a missing pastor, and there are issues that concern us, and there are issues that are concerning the wider nation. So the Christians are wrestling with what does it mean to be a Malaysian as well. I think this is something that I wanted to highlight. And not just at the local church level, now a little bit more in the middle, civil society. I'm part of a group with my friend Eugene Yap, our common friend. It's called Kairos Dialogue Network. And this was an initiative that was launched, I think, last year, but was discussed for some time, where we are trying to occupy a space or claim a space in the middle between the church and civil society, doing a bit what IRF is doing, but not in the same way, but at least to engage, to allow for a different group to engage, groups like Abim, Ikram. We haven't gone so far as ISMA yet. So I've moderated ISMA before, so for a particular forum, for something else. But I think the Christian community is trying to, through these efforts, get out of our comfort zones. I think that there are some things changing in the reaction and the responses, that the role of religion in the public sphere. And I noticed that movement happening in at least some time ago with the Buddhist youth. One of the Buddhist youth leaders came up to me and said, wow, some of your Christian youth, we had a CCM youth, was coming up with statements at one point in Bahasa, and we found it quite inspiring. And we Buddhist youth also need to be more engaged. So it's interesting how religions influence each other, sometimes positively as well as negatively too. Of course, in the days of Hindraf, I'll never forget the guy who fixed my, when I was a pastor in Bangsa at that time, I still am, but those days, he fixed my photocopy machine. And we had very interesting conversations of how, for him, he was revisiting what Hinduism meant for him. Now, of course, this is controversial, how that evolved and developed. But like it or not, I think religious people will, let me put it this way. On one hand, some of us will be engaging in the human rights discourse as rightly we need to. There must be something that is a bit more common that we share and discuss that is external to us. But we tend to go back internal as well, to dig out resources to confront the crises and challenges. And I remember Hindraf that there's that young man who shared his struggle and his weekly meetings. And this was early days of 2009, then the early days when we just got to know each other. So the role of religion, at least for the Christians, is something top on our agenda as we think about. And now I'm teaching in the seminary, for example, and I used a Malaysian studies book as one of my courses, and then I got my friends like Andrew Koo from the Bar Council, Lee Ho An, the economist, and others to come and provide an alternative view than the main textbook. I found it very useful as a pedagogical frame. But it's interesting because we're trying to teach this to pastors. So they're not just talking about theology, God, but how about the world in which we have to live in? And back to Imran's question about exclusivism, we were talking about hell, that whether you are going to hell, I'm going to hell, in that case, we might meet in hell. But my friend Wong Chin Huat used to joke with us, this guy is non-religious. He says, well, the Christians will be going to the Buddhist hell, and the Buddhists might be going to the Muslim hell, so we're all going to hell. And then this thought came to my mind just now. Okay, at the end of the day, all of us might go to hell. Okay, we all don't know. We leave that to God, as far as I'm concerned. But please, let's not make this world hell for the rest of us. Now, at least when we're living here, we can draw on our resources, and I think that's what we are trying to talk about. And the human rights instruments is something that the Christians also sign on to and would appreciate. But at the same time, I think we also recognize within the Muslim communities, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikhism, and etc., I think there's a internal wrestling going on there. When I take my students to visit these places of worship, it's very, very interesting. The first part tends to be very nice about your religion, my religion, what does it mean? But once we probe deeper after the nice tea from the Sikh Gurdwara, which is very good tea, by the way, then we hear the frustrations of the Sikh community about the next generation. We hear the frustrations of the Hindu community, sometimes towards us Christians. I remember the man in charge of the Hindu temple will tell my students, you pastors, you can spread your religion as long as you don't talk bad about mine. And then these young future pastors are confronted with that face to face. And when I go to the Chinese or meet with a Buddhist monk, interesting, this Buddhist monk, we sat with him for about an hour, and he was Mahayana Buddhist, and he had some Theravada training, etc., went to Myanmar, Taiwan, and all that. But there was moments where you could hear his frustration as a Buddhist minority in that conversation, and how he's reflecting on the role of religion, his religion, in the public sphere. And I think when that happens, it can go both ways. I think I recognize that some of my Malay Muslim friends would be uncomfortable with that, because this may be seen as assertion, arrogance. I don't know. That is for an interesting dialogue. Or it may be seen, oh, finally, all of us can think about what we can contribute to the construction of Malaysian identity. So 3 images come to my mind, and I'd like to use this as a close. Do I still have time? Okay. Some people talk about melting pot. That was the tourism agency. We are a melting pot. We all come, and it's like the Star Trek Borg. We all mesh together. We lose ourselves, and we lose our identities, and we just have one language, everything. There's this kind of ideal. The other, I used to use it myself, is a mosaic. So we kind of piece ourselves together with our differences, and somehow we stick together, right? But the last one, I think, since we are still hungry, some of us, right? I can read your minds, you see. This is like, is rojak, the Malaysian salad. We try to claim it, no, maybe the Indonesians want to claim it too. You know? It's like the fight. There's an rojak, yeah, compared to batik, you know. Okay, let's not go there. We don't want to have a conflict here. But seriously, the rojak is something quite interesting because, I mean, it's unique that you can see the distinctive contribution of each, and somehow it can be tasty. So that is my little thought for tonight. Thank you.
All right, quick summary. So first thing is that the fact that now we live in a mediatized world where our source of info is from online media. That's our first source of information. And with regards to religion itself, it's become more publicized. And what Dr. Sivin argues is that religion itself has become more visible thanks to online media. And what that itself brings to the question of how religion should play a role in the public sphere. And in some sense, the fact that we have increased visibility of religious minorities can present either an obstacle or an opportunity for us to redefine or really look into the question of Malaysian identity. So I think now is the time for question and answers. Let's open this first round of question and answers. 3 questions for this turn. Please go to the mic, introduce yourself.